So I've gotten really into cutting and carving rocks, which is a great material to add to my woodworking projects. Now, most of my projects have involved just a basic angle grinder with a tile cutting blade. But as I get into bigger and bigger rocks, I've decided to test what I can do with bigger equipment. So I got this Husqvarna break saw, which features these two parallel blades so that hopefully I can take my rock carving to the next level. So this video is going to be all about what can this do versus what can this do, and at the end I'll kind of give my synopsis of whether or not expensive tools are worth it versus grinding it out with the basics. But before we get started, we're going to set up a sandbox to play in. To hold the rocks stable while I cut them, I just like making a bed of sand. So the saw hooks up to a garden hose, which is great because that's going to keep the dust down. So probably won't need the space helmet for this one. And I got the electrical version just because it's lighter and I'll be using it at the shop where I have abundant sort of outlets.
The two blades do create a bit of pull and the saw wants to go forward, but all you really need to do is hold it steady and let the weight of the saw bring it down through the rock.
So the reason why this saw has two blades is because they pair nicely with this very slim shaft. The idea, and this is why it's called a break saw, is we make parallel cuts, then we can break out this piece, and then this whole thing can go deeper. So you can still only go with the first cut up until about here, about 2 to 3 inches, which is normal for a blade this size. But if we break out this middle cavity, then the whole thing can go deeper, and we keep plunge cutting, breaking out the middle piece, and then we can go deeper and deeper until we're all the way through. Or at least that's the idea. So the orange paint there from the arbor tells us we were bottoming out. So now we're just going to chip this out. And look at that. So now we can go deeper. Time for another break. I mean, that is cool.
These stones are a black basalt, which I buy from a local landscaping supply place for about 30 cents a pound.
Pretty flat and smooth. So this is a 9-inch Milwaukee saw that I have. It's a bigger blade than the small angle grinder, but I bottom out about right there. The arbor starts hitting, and that's about as deep as I can go. So even though the blade's big, I'm only getting about 2.5 to 3 inches of usable depth. Whereas what's so cool about this thing is once I do those middle breaks, everything's in plane and I can go the full way down. So this way I can go right down from one side and I don't have to cut around the perimeter, because that was where a lot of my labor was coming, is I had to then flatten it out because I was cutting around the perimeter that was mostly flat, but then when the middle piece breaks away, there's a lot of grinding out to do. So look at that, all the way down, one cut. I mean, we should almost just put a board in there.
One of the main reasons I got this saw is because we need 40 stone side tables for the Reset Hotel. With this kind of quantity, the improved efficiency of this saw really saves a lot of time and makes it worth it. These stones cost me about $12 each, and I've sold side tables like this for over 100. And after cutting the tops, I only need to do about 5 to 10 minutes of angle grinding to get the tops perfectly flat and smooth. That means I can make about 4 to 5 of these side tables in an hour. So I could see a pretty clear path for the break saw paying for itself after just a month or two. So although the raw materials are heavy and hard to move, they store easily outside, and once you start fabricating, if it's just stone, you can be done pretty quickly. I gotta think of an idea to do with these approximately 3/4 inch black stone tiles that I get as an offcut from this process. When I started cutting this larger stone, I kept thinking back to the ability to just make a notch, but not all the way through, that a board could fit in. And I decided to do this as a little bit more of a complicated side table that could be used outside by inserting a piece of thermally treated ash. So first I cut a perfectly flat bottom so it could stand upright. And here was the part that required a little skill. I made a second cut that needed to be parallel to the first cut because I want that board not to be at an angle. I want it to be horizontal so we can use it as a side table. I could set up a jig for this, but I just did it by eye. And with just a few cutting and breaking cycles, I was able to remove enough stone so that one of my 1-inch thick ash deck boards could almost fit right into the gap. I get this decking from arbor wood, and it's ash that's baked in a kiln until it turns as dark as walnut. It's a fantastic material for outside, and when you put a little oil on it, it looks really good. But for right now, we're going to hear a message from the sponsor of this video, Exter. Exter makes really cool products. I use them a lot when I'm traveling. They're well made and they look really minimalist and clean. The wallet is something I use every day. It's a combination of metal and leather, and I like that you can push a button to have easy access to your cards. But the two items I'm really excited about is this card which pairs with my iPhone. I can use the Find My function on my iPhone to identify wherever this card is. And I like to place this inside luggage or critical pieces that I travel with so I can always just keep a track of where my things are. Whenever possible, I always try to travel with just a carry-on. I have a trip coming up to Egypt really soon, and I'm going to do it with just a carry-on. But that means I have to really compact my clothing and stuff to fit into as small of a space as possible. And this vacuum travel bag is exceptional. It's a really sturdy, well-made bag with an airtight zipper, so I can load in more bulky items like sweaters and jackets and stuff. Hook up this little tiny portable vacuum device, suck out all the air, and what's really good about this is the vacuum device is so small that can travel with me and I can just charge it with a USB port. The extra stuff is well priced and it's really cool. So check out all the links in the description below and have a look for yourself. Alright, back to cutting rocks. It takes a few tries with a new tool to really figure it out and get comfortable with it. And these bigger granite boulders are more typical of the rocks that I get for free out here in the desert. This is where the break saw really excels. I started realizing that I don't have to just go straight down. I can kind of follow the two cuts that I make initially to work my way around the perimeter of the stone. That means I don't have to stop as often to chip out pieces. I can kind of work around the perimeter, do a little chipping session, and I can cut a stone this size into two pieces really cleanly in just about 15 to 20 minutes. Now obviously if you've seen my previous videos about cutting rocks, you've seen that I can put a pretty flat face just using a regular 4.5-inch angle grinder. But for bigger stones, it's hard to perfectly separate it into two clean pieces. What I typically do is do a perimeter cut all the way around and then pick the side I want to save and then basically obliterate the other side by just making a whole bunch of cuts and hammering and chiseling it away into nothing. I then have to switch up my grinding attachments and then grind that face to be relatively smooth and flat. This process also makes a lot of dust because my angle grinder isn't a wet angle grinder. Luckily I have the space helmet to protect my lungs, but it is a fairly messy and dusty process. The angle grinder is also more versatile than the break saw because there's a whole bunch of different attachments that you can add to it, all of which are relatively inexpensive. This tile cutting blade that I use is about $25 to $30, whereas the replacement blades for the break saw are about $150 each, and you need two of them. And with an angle grinder, not only can you cut stone, you can carve it and even drill holes into it using hole saw attachments. But really I think the biggest consideration comes down to price. The break saw is about $2,000. That's a really expensive tool. You can get a corded angle grinder for under $75, and the HP one that's my favorite is just a little over $100. And I've put these things through the ringer and they hold up really great cutting steel, carving wood, cutting stone, and just about everything in between. So I think if you're just trying to do one or two stone projects, I recommend the angle grinder. But if you're really trying to start a business where you have access to a whole bunch of stones and you want to process them into furniture pieces, I think there is a clear path to the return on investment for the break saw. The tool I definitely don't recommend is kind of the in-between one. It's sort of the traditional big concrete saw. I just feel these things are bulky. They can cut a little bit deeper than the angle grinder, but not significantly so. And they don't provide the optionality for doing clean cuts all the way through a large stone that the brake saw does. So you're going to see this brake saw appear in some upcoming videos, particularly in collaborations I did with Makes with Miles and with the designer Nick Baker. Both have been interested in getting into stone projects, and I had them over to the hotel, and well, let's just say we made some things out of rock. Alright, thanks for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe and let me know what you think of this kind of, well, I guess it's not really a tool review, but just kind of a discussion about sort of price and capabilities. Okay, bye.